Hi everyone, it's Rebecca, the Colorful Bookmaster, and I wanted to start off by saying today we're going to be looking at what I am currently coloring. I thought that I would show you a particular element that I've been working on, but also the fact that I've kind of moved away for right now, not forever, from the colored pencils to the markers, the alcohol markers, and the learning curve is huge, guys, and give yourself that. This is really different in the way that you have to look at stuff. And I have to say, the ugly before it gets pretty is pretty darn ugly. And that's hard for me because when I would do with colored pencils is I can do small little sections, I can figure out color combinations, and it didn't seem to stay ugly. In fact, to me, it kept getting prettier and prettier. Whew, with markers, that's not the same. There's some ugly before there's some pretty going on. But I wanted to share with you, I've been working in a couple different books. I'm going to be sharing with you some completed pictures in those. But let me tell you what I'm really kind of interested in and what I'm kind of doing is these cute coloring books. So this is Girl Moments by Coco. It's all over the internet. And the reason I'm starting with this book is because I need inspiration. I need tutorials. I need to learn how to use these different tools whenever I'm going to be, or mediums, I guess, whenever I'm doing these little colored art. And I don't know markers. So that was one that I really had to go out there and try to figure out. And so I've been watching a lot of other videos, people coloring in this, and then looking at inspiration and kind of getting idea, because how the markers work in this book is very different than they would on like paper made for markers. And so like even printing or copying these or printing out PDFs, I need to see what other people are doing and how they're doing it physically on this paper. This is that Amazon paper. I've also got a couple other books that we're going to be looking at today. This one, Creepy Cuties, another Coco, but it's, I think it's, no, maybe it's not. Yes, it is. It is a Coco. It's a bit bigger. This one's a lot of fun for anything Halloween, anything spooky, anything like that. I am going to be coloring a black cat, and the black cat is lit by Moonlight. So, big challenge for me. So I wanted to bring you along and show you how I did that, and pretty happy with the end results of it, but there's still a big learning curve. And like I said, when it comes to markers, what's kind of interesting with the learning curve also is knowing it's going to get really ugly before it gets pretty, and you got to be okay with that. I didn't have that experience with my pencils that often. I also have a couple other books that I'm going to be showing that I finished some pages in the last month and a half. So I'm going to share those first and then go on with the showing you how I colored a black cat in the moonlight. Again, it's very cutesy, it's very simplistic, but those are the best ways to start learning techniques. Also learning to work on this paper. These are all Amazon paper. They do absorb a lot of the alcohol marker, so you don't get the blending as easy, but how do you make the blending? And I'll give you a little hint. For me, it's by saturating that paper, which is crazy, and it still holds up. So there's got to be some magic with those alcohol markers. I use Ohuhus. I have almost the entire set at this point. But this is what I'm kind of focusing on, kind of just learning a new technique, and I'm loving it, and I'm loving all the inspiration that I found as well. So why don't you come along, see what I'm coloring, and then we'll go through how I was coloring the black cat and the back moon, because it is so different than what I do with my colored pencils. So hope you enjoy. Talk with you soon. So the first book here, as I said before, was Girl Moments by Coco. This book is everywhere on the internet. Tons of color alongs for all of these pages, which is fantastic, and a lot of inspiration. And I do go out and watch those. This is the first one that I completed. I wanted to go for autumn, as you can tell. What I'm really liking is the texture on the Ugg boots down here. Now that's with acrylic markers, which is a whole nother thing to kind of add. And little stripy socks, and but she's just sitting outside eating a strawberry cake and drinking lemonade in autumn. I don't know that those are the things I would be drinking in autumn, but that's fine. You have the little lights, and then I use more acrylics up here at the top. So there's a lot of ways to color these, and being fantastical or fantasy-like is part of the joy of it and helps me break out of trying to make everything look so realistic, which this squirrel was not. Oh my gosh, what a challenge. Don't know what I'm going to do there. I don't think animals will be my forte, but perhaps I'll force myself to try to learn a little bit better. That one was a little scary. So this is Anime Coffee Girls. I got it off of Amazon. It does not seem to attribute to any artist, I'm sorry, and so it most likely is an AI of some sort. But I did want to point out a couple things. So I use watercolor paper underneath, and I use an A4 size, which was larger than this particular coloring book. And so it gave me that edge to be able to write down, to sample out some colors, and when I was trying to create this color palette. And by speaking of color palettes, I kind of want to talk about where I got inspiration for this one and give kudos out to, once again, Coco and Fluff, because I got this color scheme inspiration from her Harvest in the Hollow subscription, which was for October of 2025. And I got some inspiration with like these little tiny lights up in the corner, because there were those little lights on the other page. And I thought, okay, maybe I could use some of the colors from this over into this page. So, really trying to find inspiration for me is probably one of the tougher things, knowing what color schemes really go well together and not just keep falling into the same ones again and again. This also gave me kind of inspiration of how I was going to make the center of those little magical spots brighter. So now we're diving into Creepy Cutie. This is actually the black cat with the moonlight behind it. I've already kind of gotten some inspiration watching a couple videos and trying to get a color palette together to kind of figure out what I was going to do and where. Also getting inspiration on how to do the moonlight more than anything else. Not so much the black cat. I wasn't able to find any. So you can see it's a very cute little coloring book, very simple. But this is the page we're going to be coloring. That's a black cat with the moon in the back. And I just thought I would share how I'm going to do the black cat and the moonlight. These are things that I was looking out on the web and couldn't find easily how to do this. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but it is a way to do it. So as I'm getting this prepped, I wanted to point out, so this is watercolor paper. I mentioned this before. It's pretty thick and it absorbs beautifully the excess marker. And because I do have a tendency to really saturate my paper to get some of these blends, I think it's helping so much. I don't even know that cardstock would have been enough for some of the really heavy duty saturation that I do. The other thing I do is I like to clip the two together. You'll see me messing with this quite a bit here. But the reason is I don't want to take a chance that that paper underneath is going to slip and it's going to then be able to bleed through because I'm not paying attention. Because when I'm coloring, that's all I want to be paying attention to. So that little clip works really well holding it in place. It is an A4 size paper, and that is, I like to be able to do things on the side if I need to be able to mark down and check that a marker is the right shade, the right color. So we are going to be focusing on this little black cat, and I'm not going to continue talking through all of it. I'll pop in here and there. Some of it I will speed up so that you can see what I'm doing. But remember, this will get very ugly before it even starts looking cute. Just bear with me. Bear with, bear with. So I'll be using Ohuhu markers through the entire project. And this one is BGY00. I won't be announcing every one of them that I'm doing. I will try to note up in most likely the left-hand corner. Do be looking for it. These are the new numbers for the Ohuhus. They renumbered them, and I'm using only the new ones. You can also Google these to find out what the old numbers are to see if you have it or not. Don't always pay attention to the sticker or the number that you're seeing on the end. But pay attention to the one that's in the left-hand corner, just because not all my markers are the new numbers, and I just want to make sure that I stay consistent going forward. Right now, I'm just outlining and doing some of the highlights where I think there's going to be moonlight hitting. So this is kind of the backwards way of thinking. Usually I start with light through everything and then start getting darker. This one I have to kind of map out where I'm going to go using alcohol markers. That's how they're different than the the colored pencils that I often use. So this kind of mapping out and looking ahead means that you need to be thinking, in this case, where those highlights are going to go. I'm leaving a little bit of extra white on some of those toes, but if you notice, the marker also bleeds. So that's another thing that's to be considered when you're doing this. If you want white to peek through, you're going to have to really not go up to that black line of the drawing. And at this point, I haven't decided if I want a solid black tail or if I'm going to do a white. I see the little marks. I kind of think maybe it's supposed to be white at the end, but I really want a black cat. So I'm just going in, like I said, doing a lot of the outlining, kind of places where I need to kind of remind myself to differentiate between the really dark and the really light. Again, this will make much more sense as we progress on, but this is my lightest gray color that I came in with for this black cat. So, it's the lightest gray that I had. So something that I want to share with you regarding this whole process, you're going to see that light gray get smaller and smaller. So it's always easy to take away than it is to add when it comes to the light colors. So with markers, this was a huge thing because there's really not a lot of room for error. So you have to give yourself space to do highlights and to kind of do the blending. And so I probably should have done this even further away and made even a wider light gray border, because if you watch closely, you'll see the ink continues to bleed until it's completely dry. And so that line is even smaller than when I started it. So it does make it challenging. But these are things that you will get used to, of how juicy your markers are, how much and every book's going to be different. Even if it is Amazon paper, depending on where you get it from, it could be very different. And how your markers, your alcohol markers, react to it and spread in it is something I think I'm going to have to get used to. I'm going to have to get more familiar with. So it's very, very interesting to me to watch this, because even right now I could see that the space I left up on the cheek was wider when I started, up on those little hairs kind of sticking out, and it just continues to bleed. And so the little toe beans down here, or the little toes of the cat, I really should have made the middle even smaller than I did, because I'm not leaving a lot to be able to highlight. Now you can use acrylic markers, and you'll see me do that at the end, to go and highlight where the black lines are, so that helps a little bit. But to get a kind of a blend, a glow, you got to give yourself room. So these, like I said, they really do take getting used to. And wow, it's going to be a learning curve, that's for sure. I've gotten more out of the lines as I progressed with this page than I did right now. I was being very careful with this black cat, but you'll see at the end product, I can see where I've gotten a little too close to lines or even over them. So it's all fun. It is a new technique, and I do enjoy learning new techniques. So this is actual speed of coloring. So that's something else. One of the things with markers is you can't color too slowly. It may look like I'm coloring slow, but I'm actually, on the larger parts, you'll see I have to go kind of quickly, because that is what causes it to blend so nicely and not have all those striations or marks in them like you see, particularly when you use water-based markers. They kind of have to be touching wet to wet to blend. And so right there you can kind of see a difference between the old and the new, but then it starts blending in together. And that's because I have to go kind of quickly. So you'll see me start going pretty fast. This is really hard for me because I am a really slow colorer, and my confidence, and now this is not so important with this black cat. I can have those different spots. If you see on the leg there of where it's wet and dry and you see that line, that's okay if that ends up staying like that, to be honest with you, because I will be going over this with more markers, and a lot more markers, as you can see, a lot more layers to it, and then it all blends together. But that's one of the downsides with definitely water-based markers, is they always leave those striations regardless. Alcohol markers, you have to move quick to make sure that it doesn't do that. If you look up on the face, it's much smoother compared to what's down on the body right now, and that's because that body was a big area. But again, I'm not as worried about that because I will be using other markers to go over it. It'll get darker, and then they all start blending together much better. And right now I'm going to start speeding this up. So this is 4 times speed. We will be getting up probably to 8 times speed, just so that you can see everything going on. But I just wanted to kind of put that little caveat in there that you're seeing, again, this is the ugly before it gets pretty stage, but you're going to be seeing that this is sped up, but the original you were seeing is how slow I was actually going. So, but keeping the markers wet and as much as possible, wet on wet, will help with those lines. It's not always possible, and as we add more markers, you're going to see that disappear anyway. So I hope you enjoy, and here we go. So using this darker color, you're going to start seeing those little toes, little toe beans showing up. So little toes are starting to show up, and see how I've left the lighter color that we initially put down still showing, so that you can see the differentiation. And this is the key to it. Now this is a slightly bluish gray that I've got going on with this this layer, and I want that to kind of, because we are going to go black, a blue or purple hue to your blacks really helps whenever you're using your different shades. So I try to stay with cool grays to start with, and now I have kind of a blue-green gray with this much darker. Now you might think this is already done, but it's going to go a little bit more intense once we come on with even another darker shade of blue. Now I've put up 2 different colors up here, up into the left corner, the CG01 and the BGY02, because I am having to flip between the two to make a little bit of a blend. So I like to wet it just a little bit with the lighter and then come in with the darker, because the darker bleeds into the lighter a little bit. But this is kind of, again, this is really not what I'm used to doing, having to kind of color and switch between 2 markers. But it does start helping the blend, the glow a little bit as we keep moving on. So that was where I was doing those double colors. And so as you can tell, it has that light and shade, so you can see the highlights, see all the little toes, see all the legs, the separation. But it is an incredibly black cat. I do think I'm going to go back and probably darken that tail. I don't like the white. Now we're going to work on the moon up in the upper right hand corner. And the moon needs to have a glow about it. It's all dark. How am I going to lighten it, make it look more like a moon? So we're going to have to do the combination of blending around it and also on what we're going to do with the clouds in front of it. So it makes for a little of a challenge. So here I am, I kind of created palettes and was looking at different colors and trying to see which ones work. This one we're going to go with the sky colors. The BV32 is the lightest and the darkest being the BV013 at this time. I think I do go and put even darker at the very end. So we're going to start this off with that very light BV37. And we're just going to put it around quite a lot of the moon. Now remember, I'm making that buffer zone. I need space to start doing blending. And this really is one where it's very, very patchy until you get those multiple layers on there and start saturating the paper more and more and then doing the blend. There's a lot of going back and forth as I move forward and go through this process. You'll see me kind of switching between the pens quite a lot. So hopefully you've gotten, or hopefully I've gotten all of the numbers. I'm now introducing the colorless blender. This is one that comes in every one of the sets. This kind of removes some of the pigment from the alcohol markers, making it a little bit lighter. It can be used for blending. I haven't used it a lot. I've seen it on some really great techniques that I'm looking forward to trying to do in the future. But I'm just going to be going around the moon, kind of trying to make that lighter color by removing the color with the colorless blender. Now I'm going in with two very distinctly different colors. They're not really close to one another. One is a blue and the other one is a blue violet, and there's one's quite light and the other one's not. And I was going to see if I can make some type of blend, which I cannot do at this point. Now, it doesn't mean it isn't going to happen in the future, but this right now, these are two wildly different. Even if I do the wet on wet kind of technique, nothing is really happening, and it's just they're that diverse. So don't worry, we'll come back to it. I'll have the colors, and like I said, what I found is saturating the paper really helps with the blends. For me, and also going back over with multiple colors eventually, just like with the black cat where you didn't see any streaks at the end. You're not going to see definitely this type of difference. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of keep going with just the one color, the BV013, and kind of bring it around under the bat and into the lighter blue again, and then just keep going from there. Okay, now we're getting into the triple markers. So right now I only have two, and I'm starting with that BV32, and I'm going back in and re-wetting what I've already colored with that, and then going over the BV340. So you can see where it's gotten darker. One of the things you see, this is where you're going to start seeing what I was talking about, almost saturating. So now we're in with the BV340, and it's really starting to meld. And I'm going to see how wet it is, it almost shines. So then I came in with the BV08. And that is a slightly in between color. And I'm just going to keep saturating and hoping those start blending and melding together. But again, look how shiny it is. That is pretty darn wet. And if I didn't have the watercolor paper underneath, that would just be going through any cardstock or regular paper or anything. So either use the silicone kind of based back for underneath it. They kind of have these sheets that are silicone. Some of them, they come with the Ohuhus. I wouldn't trust those with even how wet this is, but what's amazing is the paper doesn't disintegrate with it. It doesn't even pill. So see how I've gotten that really dark and now it's blending in, and it's because I'm letting it seep and move each other's pigments around, and with it being so saturated, it takes it a little longer to dry. And that's what you're trying to fight against, is the drying before those pigments can start melding together. Also use a series of flicks, trying to make it a little bit lighter going back into the color around. And I want you to notice here too, remember how wide of a berth I gave the moon. In other words, I gave that a big circle with a really light color. And now that circle's gotten smaller and smaller. And that's what I was saying. Give yourself plenty of room for those blends to happen. If I had done a really small circle, I wouldn't have as much to be able to blend. And so I think that that's really key. So give yourself a little breathing room. It was really ugly, and now we've got us starting to get a smoother and smoother blend. So now we're going to start working on the moon itself. And we're going to start in with the really dark shadows to begin with. So that's my CG05 is my darkest on this. And we're staying with all the cool grays. And now we're going into the 3. We're kind of doing it backwards, as you can see, just to kind of fill in all those little spots. And then now we're going to go with the full moon. We're going to go ahead and color it. Now, why not just leave it white? You could, but how do you blend? And how do you make things maybe look a little more like there's craters and things? I'm just trying to experiment to see. The white might have been better and just went around with a Signo white pen on the edge, but this dries pretty light. And since, we're going to color the entire page, I think white should be used sparingly, leaving it just blank, just because right now, even with what we're doing, if I had done any of this on the white, it would have looked really odd. Now, I could have probably started with lighter colors then, maybe only using the CG03 and the CG001 to add in these little extra bits. But we're trying to give some texture to the moon. The moon has lots of texture. And now I'm going to go with the Signo gel pen. Now, I don't really like this pen. I have fought with this pen for years and years. I know some people absolutely swear by them. I should have just went and got my acrylic, but the scratchiness that it kind of gives, I think, helps with the moon to some degree, but it's very frustrating to use. So I probably would just go get an acrylic pen at this point. So now I've colored in the darker parts down the bottom. I didn't make you see that, but you can see there's a lot of splotchiness. So we've got a pretty good blend in and around the moon. Now I need to meld all of these colors back together. You could leave it a little bit like that. It almost looks like clouds and stuff in the background. But because we have cartoonish looking clouds at the front, we're going to go ahead and start trying to blend this just a little bit better. And as you can see over the dark colors, you don't see the lines as much, but we're going to go back and we're going to really start working on that. So here we have it completed with the background and the blending. I'm pretty happy with. I really feel like it feels like a night sky and still has a little bit of that cartoonish feel to it. That's going to be the in-between that I'm always going to be reaching for, because I have a tendency to try to be hyper realistic-ish in a lot of my adult coloring, and that's not what these books are about, that's for sure. So I hope you enjoyed that. But before I go, here's the completed picture. Now this came out really so much better than I expected. I had a few other challenges, but the cat really pops and the moon pops now that all the colors in. And I have to say, I actually really, really like how the even the coffin in the background looks. So happy Halloween, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of it. If you're not a colorer, maybe just sitting around listening to me babble on, there are a lot of coloring. I'm going to call them tutorials. Most people say they don't want to be considered a tutorial, but they're color alongs, or you can watch them how they do some of their techniques. I don't shy away from the name tutorial, but just know I don't think I'm an expert, far from it. I'm very, very raw and new to all this. If you have any other tips or tricks for blending, please share them down below. I would love to know. But just know this is kind of where I'm going for a little while. We're going to play around with the markers. I might try and start a colored pencil picture in the near future, but for right now I'm really playing with these markers and seeing how I can learn to use them, and then also keeping the pictures a little bit more simplistic. I say that, but I still manage to stretch out multiple days out of these pictures. So, give yourself plenty of grace. And if you're a slow colorer, great. But if you're, somebody that likes to do things quick, these are fun and you can do them, and you don't have to do them to the point that I do them, that's for sure. But I hope you enjoyed it. And for now, that's what I'm currently coloring. So as I always say, keep coloring those pages. Bye for now.